Welcome to the Church of Marketing. I'm your host, Connor Wright, and this is Jake Lewis.
Yes, sir.
JL, the big J, Jakey Poo.
Well, every time
Jakey?
you say J-Flex, I always think you're saying my name. Like Jake Flex? I'm like,
Jake Flex. Jake, super excited for this because we've been working together for
since November. So it's now been almost 7 months.
7 months. And
time flew. Holy cow.
We started this podcast together. But I'm excited for you to, what we want to do today is just dive into your origin story. What made you the Batman of content?
Yeah, that's a weird story. I mean, I have a lot of friends who, they don't believe me when I say I've done certain things in my career. Mm-hmm. I have one of these weird backgrounds where if anybody goes and looks at like my resume or my LinkedIn or just anywhere where they can actually see my full like job history, they like look at me and then they like look back and they go like, there's no way you did all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of just tried everything for a while there. And sometimes I was doing multiple jobs at the same time. But I feel like I was very similar to you as a young kid. Like my big little business as a kid was selling golf balls. Oof. So my grandmother's house, her backyard was up against a golf course. So her yard was always full of golf balls. And then there was this kind of big, just empty field full of just like weeds and tumbleweeds. And there was always just tons of golf balls in there.
Yeah.
So my little brother and I would always go out and just collect them. Once we had maybe a couple shoe boxes full of them, we'd go set up a little table right next to a golf cart path. Mm-hmm. It was like in the HOA like jurisdiction, so we could do that.
Yeah.
And we'd set up a little table with a cooler full of like cold sodas and golf balls, and we would just do that all summer till we basically sold them all out. And a couple times we'd just have a guy come up and he'd look through them and he'd be like, "Here's $100 for the whole box," and then he would just bounce and we were done for the day.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, always kind of had that entrepreneurial itch. I got into photography more when I was probably around like 11 years old.
Wow.
So it's been like 19 years. Like I actually have my first ever camera I got from my parents. So I think it was my birthday. It was a Kodak digital camera. Shoots 2 megapixel photos. Oh. Like, still works too. You had AA batteries, but AA batteries. I had to buy an old SD card because new ones don't work in it. So I think I have a 1 gig SD card for that camera. The worst quality of everything. And, I would have disposable cameras, the little, with the rolly wheel. Yeah. And so I was always interested, mainly because my dad was always documenting like family things. He always had that like dad cam.
Oh yeah.
And so I kind of grew up watching him basically make home videos for not just our family, but like extended family. Mm-hmm. So like at family reunions, he'd have like a whole highlight of all these experiences and events, which was great. It was kind of like the family historian. So I think I definitely got kind of the love for documenting things from just seeing that growing up. And then really when it came to like creative, like always kind of just did photos for fun, more to just document life. Social media wasn't a thing when I was in like junior high and high school. But in high school, I did a video production class. That's actually how I met Jed and Bentley, who was the production crew that was renting the studio on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
So I was in class with them, and they were making videos back then. I was as well, and diving into like special effects and stop motion type videos, and we were just shooting and having fun. And went off to college and wanted to actually go into marketing. So actually, initially it was accounting. I was on the accounting path, and I took a kind of like right above the beginner class, and I just hated it. And I was like, cool, I'm pivoting. And then I was looking into information systems and kind of got deep into that, and then decided, no, I don't enjoy this as well.
Yeah.
Then started taking some marketing classes, and I was like, oh, I love this. Like, it's taking kind of these two worlds I love, the business world and the creative world, and kind of merging them together. Kind of put all my eggs in one basket. And the marketing program, if you don't know, at BYU is very competitive. I didn't really have any marketing background or anything, and you can apply to 3 schools when you apply to get into the business school, and I just kind of put all my eggs in one basket in marketing. Didn't get in.
Oof.
While that was all happening, I got a bunch of jobs in marketing. So I actually was like a marketing manager, like assistant manager at the Classic Fun Center in Orem.
Oh, nice.
And so I got into like text marketing and email marketing and building their websites and doing like event marketing and just like everything for them. We would, do the video and photo for all the events. I created an influencer program, so we'd have influencers come sponsor like disco nights or whatever on the weekend. And then I worked for a BYU marketing agency that did all the marketing for all like the BYU owned programs.
Yeah.
And so I worked with, the email designers and graphic designers and all those people for a couple years as well. And then I didn't want to apply to the marketing program again. I think I was a little traumatized. I was like, you know what, like I'll try something else. And I'd come across global supply chain, which was kind of a weird degree in that it kind of took all these various aspects of the different business classes I had taken and kind of merged them into one. There was like CRM stuff, there was negotiations, there was logistics, there was programming, there was, your typical like just business management and HR, ethics, whatever. Even took a few like entrepreneurial classes, and I just kind of liked it because of the variety. I didn't want to do just one thing for the rest of my life. And then I graduated, and they pushed really hard there, like, hey, you need to get like a big name, go to a big company, like kind of boost your resume. So I got a job with Boeing up in Seattle, working in their Japanese contracts department. Wow. Showed up. We moved to Seattle, showed up within 2 weeks. I came home and just looked at my wife and I was like, I've made a horrible mistake. Like, I hate this job. It's boring. Like, I could have done this with a high school degree. Like, it requires little to no skill. It's a ton of monotonous, busy work. And I really don't feel challenged at all. Like, honestly, I would work from like 6 to 2 just because traffic was really bad in Seattle. Yeah. So I'd get there and I was pretty much done with all of my work for the day by the time people showed up at 9. And so I would just kind of like twiddle my thumbs, ask for extra projects if they had them. And I did that I was with Boeing for a little over 2 years. Wow. Because during all of that, COVID happened. The job market was crazy. I couldn't find anything that I would want to do. Yeah. And I was like, this is kind of just a safe, boring job. But then I would leave work at 2:00 and I would go create. I would go meet up with other creatives. We'd go hike. We'd do landscape photography. We'd make videos, do photos, portraits. I would start doing, people's portrait photography on the side. I would reach out to brands and start doing paid shoots with them. So pretty much I had a job that was so boring and so dull that I was able to just express myself creatively in all the other hours.
That's awesome.
Which was great. So it was a good balance. I could still support myself and my wife, but I could still go do what I loved. And I would say that was probably like, for me, like the pinnacle of being able to spend my time creating for most of the time without having to like
worry about finances
or worry about like a client telling me what to do. I was just creating because I wanted to create. And so I was just experimenting. And if I was working with a brand, it's because they liked what I was already creating. And so I was just taking their brand and plugging in with the style. COVID happens. Things are crazy. I mean, my wife loses her job. And I bump into an old buddy in Oregon over the 4th of July during that first year of COVID. Mitchell Thane, he owns Film Lab, founder of Film Lab. And I bump into him, and he had just been pulled into Wright. So he was running a company, Avenue Film Co. And they were brought in-house to Wright to start their in-house like content team.
Right.
And didn't really click for me. Then I kind of just heard about what he was doing. We kind of spent the day with our wives in like Oregon, and I was showing him all the sites because I knew the Pacific Northwest. And I saw him post about a week later on Instagram. He's like, hey, I'm looking for a creative producer.
Yeah.
And I reach out and I'm like, hey, dude, I would freaking love that. Like, that would be incredible. And he goes, dude, like, I would have never thought of you had we not just linked back up in Oregon.
Yeah.
And because I met him back in 2012 at school, and we kind of stayed in touch. We did a few shoots. I actually used him as an influencer for one of the events at Classic Fun Center. So we kind of stayed in touch. And he's like, dude, okay, cool. Let's get you an interview. And I went through all the rounds of the interview, made it to the end, got the job.
Heck yeah.
I quit my job, Boeing, Monday, and packed everything up and drove to Utah that next weekend and started at Route that following Monday. And my wife stayed in Seattle for a couple months while we tried to figure everything out, but went down, and that was kind of the start of my like true like full time as a creative.
Yeah.
And they kind of picked me because they're like, you have this like weird talent where you can be both like logistically and operationally minded, but you're also a creative, and so you understand the world, and so you can kind of bring these two together.
Yep.
Whereas usually you just find people who are like just operational and logistically minded, or they're just creative. And those two worlds never really combine. And just through all these weird, odd jobs and things I'd had through the years, I'd basically been able to develop both of those. And I was spending all my extra time working on my passion, which was creating. So I was with Wright for a year and a half. Jackson and Mitch left I don't think I'd been there for a year. They left to go start Film Lab. So I took over as the director of content at Wright, and I ran the show and shooting, editing, producing everything for, it was like another 7-8 months. And then I started getting that itch, and I was like, I don't want to work in-house anymore. Like, I'm going to go start my own production company. So I quit. I had no clients lined up. I bought, it was like $30,000 or $40,000 worth of equipment on a credit card so that I could have everything I needed. I had got one of those checks in the mail, like 0% APR for a year.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to purchase all of my production equipment.
My anxiety levels just shot through the roof.
Bought my $5,000-$6,000 laptop on my Apple card so that I'd have 12 months of 0% to pay for it over the next 12 months. But again, 0 clients. And it was actually Jed and Bentley. I saw them post, they were looking for an editor. And I reached out and I was like, hey, here's my rate. Like, would love to work with you. And they reached out and they're like, yes, like, let's do it. And so I had worked for about 2 weeks worth of work with them. Like, I think it was about 80 hours of editing I had to do. And during that time, I just started posting on TikTok a ton.
Yeah.
And on Instagram. I was posting like 3 or 4 times a day. And people started finding me on TikTok, and I started getting phone calls and emails, and everything from like little creatives, small businesses to bigger businesses just started reaching out.
Yeah.
And from the moment I got that first job with Jed and Bentley, I never stopped being busy. And then I got pulled into the Pro Pickleball Association as a freelance videographer, first to just start editing some of their like tournament recaps, and then I started getting pulled into their live events. And when I showed up, I was just like, who is running this thing? Like, do you guys have processes? Do you guys have like a brand you're kind of going for? Like, how are you trying to represent this sport? And nobody really had any of that going. And I was just like, you know what, like, screw it. I'm going to just start building things. I'm going to start building processes, start putting together like more or less like what kind of content are we creating each day for the tournaments? Are we doing recaps? Are we doing individual players? Like, what are we doing? And I kind of just started crafting that together. And I caught the eye of the president and the CEO, and they just kind of started talking to me, learning more about my background. I eventually was going to like every tournament. I was like 2 or 3 a month, was traveling constantly. When I wasn't there, I was editing and doing stuff for them for their in-house marketing, and I kind of ended up becoming like more or less an employee without being an employee. Like, I was on their Slack, I had an email, but I wasn't full-time.
Yeah.
And eventually they were just like, hey, we need somebody to come in and build the whole media org for us. Like, this sport is popping off, it's growing really fast. We've got everything from live tournaments, we need marketing, we need podcasting, we need like live shows, like studio shows. We need, media days with players. I mean, anything you could think of, they're like, we need somebody to come in and build this. So they gave me an offer, talked to my wife, we accepted, we moved to Dallas. Sold our house, moved to Dallas, and I was in Dallas for about a year. Just got it all built up, hired a bunch of people. We built podcast studios. We built studio rooms. We had media days all over the country, traveling, and I built all the processes and everything, got all the right people in. And then eventually I just kind of got really burnt out, honestly. Wife tested positive for having a baby, and it just, life changed. It kind of just shifted my paradigm, and I just decided, I was like I can't keep up this pace that I'm at right now. I'm never home, I'm always working, and I really want to be there for my wife and my new baby. So we moved back to Utah to be with friends and family, and this opportunity with SIPO and Rep Labs came up through Danny, who was an old client of mine, and he and I stayed in touch. I'd gotten him in contact with certain people throughout the years, even after I left, and I mean, here we are, and we're doing everything on the SIPO side, from full-blown productions, from tiny productions to complicated, logistically nightmarish productions, to helping take care of all the creative for all the Rep Labs brands. So it's been a unique journey with a weird origin story, a degree in supply chain. I've worked in marketing, and so it's been nice for me to kind of be in a world where I feel like I'm still learning and growing. Whereas in a lot of my other jobs, I was the authority in that world, and there was nothing anybody else in the company could teach me personally. And so I just felt kind of stagnant. And like I wasn't learning something, but I was so busy, like I couldn't take the time to learn about marketing or what these other departments were doing. And I'm just that kind of personality where I'm like, I just always want to be putting more tools in my toolbox, because it's going to help me in what I ultimately love doing, which is content creation and media production. If I understand the marketing side of things, I'm going to create better, more effective content that actually leads to something for the client. It's not just a pretty video or a pretty photo. So, I mean, that's really it. It's a long story, but it's a short story, and it went really fast. And I mean, these last 7 months have just flown by. But again, just the learning and growth here has been amazing compared to many of my past areas of employment. So, I mean, I learned a crap ton running my own production company for a year, and that's why I felt confident enough to go, okay, cool, I'll go build something for someone else. So I just like building, and it doesn't really matter what it is, I'll build it. So that's really my background. I mean, it's weird. It's like I did like sports media production, which is completely different than traditional, like creating advertisements and everything. I mean, we did a lot of that, but it's just a completely different world that touches like everything in the media, video, photo space. So it was a fantastic learning experience, as well as at Route, we were creating content for e-com companies. Like 3-4 ads a week. We just churning. And they were a little higher production than, like say a UGC or something, but it was a lot of work, but it's allowed me, similar to you, to be able to work with products and services in so many different industries that you can take all those learnings and apply them to everybody else. So
it's awesome.
Well,
thanks for sharing.
It's always interesting.
It's always interesting people's journeys and like how they get from point A to point B. And I think one of the things, and this is just a personal thought on society as a whole, is just people really don't care about other people's stories, which is why I think a lot of people really just fight and argue and everything, is because people just don't understand. So what it's like walking in someone's shoes. So I love hearing people's stories of how they got there. It's just fascinating. So
Well, stories are like the foundation of society. Like that's how like history and everything used to be passed down was oral stories, then written stories. Like that's what makes us human, is the ability to tell stories. And there's nothing better. Like, why do we watch movies? Stories. TV shows, movies. Why do we read books? You know.
Which you'd think that some of these executives in these movie industries would understand, that you need to tell better stories.
Yeah.
No one cares about the CGI. They want better stories.
But yeah, I mean,
we digress.
It's all about storytelling.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening to the Church of Marketing podcast. We'll be here next week.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about boring advertising.
Boring advertising.
Boring advertising.
Yep.
See you then.
Yeah.